So great to be connected with you. Henry, welcome and thank you for being here.
JT, you know?
I'm here. Did I break
Okay,
up?
so we haven't lost you. Okay, great stuff. So, good evening, everybody, and to everybody in the room, good evening, and to everybody online, good evening. So, my name is Henry Smith. Thank you, first of all, for the privilege and the honor of being here. JT, I don't know exactly where you want me to start. I mean, when you and Rolene introduce me, there's always a little bit more pressure. So, I was father of two, grandfather of three. If I knew it would be so great, I would have grandkids when I was in grade 10. So,
Are you a grandfather already?
No, but Rolene is a grandmother.
Okay, because you look way too young to be a grandpa.
Thanks. No, we are. We are proud grandparents of three young ones. So, a blessed life, JT, a blessed life. In my profession, I am the Chief Revenue Officer of a company called Powerfleet, formerly known as Nix Telematics. We are the third largest telematics service provider in the world today. And I've been in the telematics industry for the last 27 years. And as JT said, is that the privilege of in 2018 doing life work leadership. Enjoyed it so much. I redid it in 2019 and been part of the journey ever since. And again, JT, thank you for having us tonight.
Now, Henry, tell us a bit about your endeavors because I think there's a big story regarding yourself and where you grew through. I think especially around 2011, 2012, there was a definite moment in your life where God really changed the trajectory of your life and your profession and the way you engage your world as a business leader and as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus. Tell us a bit about that because I think that gives a lot of context for what you're gonna share tonight.
Yeah, thank you, JT. So I had the privilege of spending the first 10 years of my life serving our country. I was in the National Defence Force and exited around 2007, and then I joined the corporate world. And for a while, it went really well. Firstly, with a really big corporate, and then I joined the private capital venture company in a startup. That's always really exciting. So very little sleep, lots of nerves that goes with it. And we were effectively three families, fairly well-known families, and my role was effectively to protect the Smith family interest in the business, which was mainly my brother's interest. And then one day in 2011, in August of 2011, I got called in by the shareholders. I was the managing director of the company at that point in time. And they said to me, they had a boss parade over the weekend, and this is it. This is the end of it. So, we're closing shop in a week or two. And at that point in time, relatively young kids, wife. So I had to take that journey home, driving from Victoria East back to Centurion. And for the first time ever in my life, I had to share with Rolene that I'm now officially jobless. God's grace is always evident and it's always present, regardless of the decisions you make. So first and foremost, I think one of the important things is it was effectively my decision to join the private equity firm, and it was a great 5 years of learning. But even in that period of not knowing where to next, God's always consistent. He's always there. In Afrikaans, we say, "But hy daag altyd vroue op, even when you're not worthy or when you're not ready for it." So what did happen, JT, is throughout 2011 and 2012, I made a note here. That was my own personal journey through the desert. It was a tough time. I changed jobs. I'm one of those traditional guys that you take a job, you stay in your lane, you execute against it. But in 2012, I had 4 different jobs, so the fourth time I've updated my LinkedIn, one of my mates said to me, "Bud, what's going on here, this is, you're not heading in the right way, and I realized at that point in time is that, when you're when you're under stress, you're very quick, and especially, I think males more so than females, is that, we would go to the Lord, we would ask him for advice. But if you're the man of the house, you normally have a backup plan, right? So, Lord, if you can help with this, it would be great. But if you can't, just sit, just be here, because I've got this backup plan. And I fundamentally realized that the reason why, I've landed in the position that I did, in the three opportunities that I went through in 2012 is because I was so focused on providing for my family, doing the right thing, that I didn't do the right thing, to be still with God and really to understand, what his plan was for my life. JT, so I think, the big decision I then took back in 2011 was to realize is that in every decision that I will make moving forward, professionally and in my personal life, I will always see guidance from the Lord first. And the other thing that I realized is that, I've got the ability to convince myself of some really great things, right? So it's like when you want to buy a new car, you've never seen this car until the day you decide to buy it. And then everywhere you drive, there's like 5 of them around you all the time. So you're very quick to convince yourself that, it's a great buy, or it's a great decision, or it's a great move. And I really had to humble myself in front of the Lord and ask the Lord to change the way that I look at these opportunities. And I really, in my prayers and in my quiet time with the Lord, I asked the Lord to say, Lord, if this opportunity is from you, please open the door. But if it's not, please close the door. And from that day on, every time an opportunity came, across my career or in life as such, it's firstly, I made sure that I shared it with Rolene. We would together pray about it, consistently pray about it. And then part of that prayer was just to say, Lord, if this is not for me, please let it pass. And then if and when it does, just to have the peace of mind that even this, although you might not feel great about it, I mean, it's not great when you apply for a new position or you get approached for a new position to at some point throughout the final stages of that, feel you've been rejected or turned down. But then if you realize and just go home and in your quiet time realize, but Lord, this is what I've asked from you. And our God's a loving God, and he's got obviously so much grace, and every time that he closed the door on one of these prayers, he did it in such a eloquent way. I never got a dear Johnny, I never got, no, you're not qualified enough or not good enough. None of those, it's as these opportunities came, they just quietly moved along again. And every time when it did, I had this peace of my heart that I knew that the Lord, got us to that point. Yeah, so JT, it fundamentally changed the way that I looked at life and at opportunities moving forward.
Now, Henry, when I think about specifically on tonight's topic regarding living a generous life, it's all about living generously with your time, with your talents, with your network, with your treasures, basically financially being generous. And I think a lot of times there's a way of thinking about generosity that always moves towards financial generosity, but I think it's so much more regarding generosity. And I think in our conversation during this week, you actually, something challenged you in the past couple of years regarding generosity. And I mean, the story that you shared with me during the week was a completely different story than the story that you shared last year on this platform. And I would love it if you could introduce us tonight to that case study, basically. Some principles that challenged you and paint us the picture so that we can get into what God wants to just come and stir in our hearts regarding a generous life with everything that we've got, how we can live generously.
Yeah, thank you, JT. So, based on this principle that I've learned in my life back in 2011 and 2018, Mixed Telematics approached me with a position, and we went through that same process of really spending time in our quiet time around this, engaging the Lord on this, and asking, really for His guidance. And in that period, my prayer to the Lord was really simple, and it was really focused on three principles. And the first thing I prayed to the Lord is to say, Lord, if this is your plan, please send me. And the scripture that I attached to that for myself was Isaiah 6 verse 8. This is when the Lord, where it says in the NIV, then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. So I wanted to be really clear in that I understand that if I take on this position, and I will explain to you guys how this, how this came back a couple of years down the line, is that it was from the Lord, but then if He sends me, that I pitch up, because it's a gift from Him, calling from Him, and that I execute against that. The second thing that I prayed to the Lord was just to say, Lord, if this is your plan, help me to take on the biggest role in my career today, because the position that Mixed Telematics, now Powerfleet, offered me at the time would have been the most senior that I've had in my back then 20-year career in telematics. And again, I just held on to the word in Proverbs 16 verse 3. Again, NIV, it says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plan. So, Lord, your plan. And then the last thing that I prayed for us is I said, and this was the moment you get to this point, the first thing that the devil does is he starts to sow doubt and uncertainty and all of those things. And a big question for me at the time was I went from a mid-sized company to back then the third largest telematics company in our country, so the third largest in our industry locally. And I asked myself, so what am I going to go do there? So surely they're well established, they 20 odd years old. By then they were the third largest in Africa, they were the second largest in South Africa. So what am I going to go and do there? And then one night, I was sleeping and I woke up in the middle of the night and I just felt that the Lord put on my heart and says, Henry, the things that I want you to focus on there is just break my heart, Lord, for the thing that breaks yours. And I realized that I would have purpose beyond my day-to-day doing and operations at Powerfleet, or at Mix at the time. And as I started, I took the position, and I started in July of 2018. And I very quickly realized, as JT said, as I was very privileged that in that same period I was doing live work leadership for the first time. I don't know, JT, I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, but I was on it. And but then I very quickly realized, and I think part of the struggles we've got every day is to say, but for me as a Christian in the workplace, it's not as easy as everybody thinks it is, and it's not as easy necessarily for yourself to find yourself within that role. And so what does it mean? Does it mean that I walk around daily preaching for people? Am I allowed to pray? Am I not allowed to pray? Am I allowed to talk about Jesus? Am I not? I think we live in a world where it's acceptable today to be politically correct, even if you biblically incorrect. So that is the norm that we live in. And throughout the next 5 years, coming out of 2019, you would all remember we were hit with COVID. The next few years were really 2 tough years in terms of just business in general. And Jade, I think the first thing that I learned there is that, as you said previously, I think in generosity, and very specifically in big corporate terms, we quickly go to, so what does it mean? Is it our BEE spend? Is it the projects that we get involved with? The CEO of our insurance one day said to me, Henry, please don't paint another school. So we always have to send people after you guys have done it. Great initiative, but boy, we're not adding value. Because we struggle, so what is it that we give? Is it our time? Is it our money? So what does generosity look like? And I think over the 5 years, there's a couple of principles, the 5 years that lead up to the pinnacle of this is that I've learned. And the first one was that I've learned is that I just this afternoon had a look at so what does the internet say about biblical generosity? And it says biblical generosity is a way of thinking about giving to others to involve more than just money, and is based on love, compassion, and a desire to uplift others. So, and I think that's sort of the crux of what I've learned is that initially, when people talk about generosity, your mind immediately or my mind immediately goes to, so, do I need to do something? Do I need to go and, uplift? Do I need to go in a corporate space? Do I need to go and paint a school? Do we need to give money? What is it that we need to do? And throughout my time at Powerfleet, I learned that, there's a lot more that we can give. And the first thing that I learned is that time, being generous with our time, is tremendously valuable. John Maxwell says the lessons that my dad taught me, he highlights and he says, walk slowly through the crowd, connect and engage people, touch their lives. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. One of the easiest things that we can be generous with is our time. When we walk through the building, the people that we engage, do we really engage them? Do we really connect with them to connect with them? And how do we treat people? Do we treat the security guy or the cleaner or the receptionist, with the same amount of respect that what we do the CEO? Because it all comes back to time at the end of the day. Because if you just walk a little bit slower, you've got a little bit more time, you've got a little bit more capacity. So, and time today, I'm pretty sure as I look around the table, if I ask any one of you, what does your calendar look like? You go, man, it's booked back to back. If I want the bathroom break, it has to be in my diary, otherwise it doesn't happen. So being generous with our time is really a challenge. The second thing that I've learned is the importance of relationships. And as I've already said, I love, where John Maxwell says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And again, it's very difficult to stand in relationship with somebody if you're not willing to spend the time and invest the time in them. Really understanding who they are as individuals. Just connect with them as people. We all created equally in the eyes of God. Regardless of our titles, regardless of what we do, regardless of where we work, but do we really have the view to say, but part of what I can give and part of what I can be generous with is just my ability and willingness to engage into relationships. That follows then into mentorship. Simon Sinek says a mentor is someone who always has time for you. And it is a two-way street. As much as you're the mentor, you also become the mentee. So again, do we know who those people are that look up to us and, who we can be the mentor for? And vice versa, do we know who our mentor is? And do we buy out the time to harvest that, to build a relationship and to capitalize on that? With mentorship, obviously comes advice. Always gives earnest advice. Stephen R. Covey says, trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundation principle that holds up a relationship. So, and then the last two for me was grace in the workplace. Again, I think we're running at a pace it's obviously never been seen. And every year, our kids will work harder than what we do. It's unfortunately part of that reality. We've worked harder than what our parents did. They tell us the stories of how hard they worked versus their parents. We work a little bit with data, and every day today, for those of you that's exposed to data and just data and the internet, every day we create, I think every second day we replicate all the data that's made in the world on a daily basis, something crazy like that. And then the last thing that I've realized is part of what generosity means for me is calling, and that is to be salt and light. And there's Darby Spies one night spoke to us, to the menu at Doxa Day, and Darby said the following. It was also around about 2017, 2018. He said the following: may you preach the gospel of Christ to those God entrusted into your care every single day. And if it is necessary, say something. So again, I think part of generosity is just to realize that as Christians and as people that live in a living relationship with God, we have got so much more to give than just money alone. The part that JT wants to get to is fast forward all of these learnings into 2023. It was in August 2023. And we've just announced the merger between what was then Stormix Telematics and Powerfleet Global. That would have then made us the 5th largest telematics company in the world. And we flew the executive from North America here, flew them to South Africa. The announcement was made in South Africa. It was with the bigger brother of the two in the merger. And part of what we did for this, it was winter time, and part of what we did for this was for all the staff, we had jackets made, puffer jackets made. It just looked nice. All the media was here, all the press was here. So everybody in the company, we're not massive in terms of staff, but in the South African context, we're about 400 people, 600 people, sorry, 400 in Joburg and 200 in Cape Town and Durban. And we had jackets made, and after all the announcements were made and everything that went with that, you know that feeling when you sit down and you have a coffee and you realize now, life just leaves you. It's the end of this, all the adrenaline leaves you and everything else that goes with it. And our managing director at the time, obviously he got up and he thanked all of us. And one of the comments that he made was, it left such a great impression on everybody that visited the building. And it was when they walked in, everybody was dressed the same, and it looked so nice. And it really left an impression on everybody. And in that moment, when he said it, and that obviously we had our senior management there, their senior management there. The Lord really stirred my heart with one of those, to move from concern to compassion. Was we spoke about, somebody then asked, but why did we have the jackets made? We said, well, it's winter, it is tough times. We haven't had a lot to celebrate coming out of COVID and all of these things. And we thought it would be a great idea to make the jackets for the staff. And in that moment, the Lord just challenged me to say, but is this it? Is this really it? Is this the way that you're going to say thank you to the staff and show your appreciation by giving them a jacket? Where 90% of the people that we gave these jackets to, can't even afford a jacket like that. And are you just going to sit here and is this it? And that's what the Lord challenged me with, JT, at that point.
So there's a moment where you realize, listen here, is this gonna be it? And I think there's a lot of challenges. I think regarding Henry, you mentioned something during this week, how you picked up that people are really desperate. There were specific situations, and I want us to paint the picture, and then we will break into our discussion groups on just how we can be generous within our companies. I'm wondering if you could share that with us, that moment that you guys realized, listen here, or basically the triggers that you realize, listen here, people are really desperate and in need.
Yeah, thanks, JT. Yeah, so as I said, so we're sitting there, and the Lord really challenged me to say, is this it? And then I then raised the point is just to say to the guys, firstly, a big thank you for making the jackets. And I just reminded everybody that, a lot of people in our company, cannot afford to buy themselves a puffer jacket. If you're a single mom, a single dad, if you just started working, you would buy those for your kids, or, if it's the wife, the husband, and somebody else will always get it, So there will always, although we see it as something small and as something insignificant, it is actually quite significant. As I said that, two other triggers that then trigger this is our CFO Henry, you know what, this is so true. I stood in the canteen the other day. So we've got a company run canteen that's run by Cebu, and it's non-for-profit. So they literally just charge us the cost, and the company pays the rest. So you can have a proper cooked meal for $30. Rice, vlees, and articles. So proper, not a toasting. You can have lunch for $30. It's unreal. And he said, and one of the new employees stood there and he could hear the guy speaking in Zulu. And one of the guys said to him, "Aren't you ordering?" And he said, "Thank you, I'll pass. I don't have money. I don't have the money to buy this." And as he said that, this is one of the other senior leaders said, "You know what? This now all makes sense." As he says, "I spoke to one of my friends who's the CEO of the largest logistics company in the country. And they identify that they have got a significant theft of consumables, kitchen consumables, things like milk and sugar and these type of things." And Jake, it's at that point, that I sat there and where I initially started with where the Lord really challenged me to say, if this is that, with these other two inputs, I let, it broke my heart. So,
Yeah.
and then, it got me to the point to say, do I stand up and say something and do something, or do we celebrate the great day and we go away and we tackle it another day?
Okay, so there's the situation. Basically, Henry and them, throughout the story of stuff God is stirring in their hearts, we see there's a pivotal moment of realizing, yeah, listen, guys, we need to, something is stirring and God is moving something that He wants us to engage in. And when it comes to generosity and just painting that picture of people really struggling and even the theft of consumables at the office and so on, I think it's oftentimes it's infuriating for you as a business leader because you can't believe people are doing this. I mean, it's immediately the talks about they have jobs and so on. Why this? Why this? Why this? But I think there's a situation and there's an opportunity to take generosity to a next level. And that is what I want us to discuss. How can you, in a situation like this that Henry and them are facing, what would you have done to take generosity in your organization to the next level? And I want you to give you 10, 15 minutes for that so that you guys can discuss it in the boardrooms, wherever you are. And then we'll come back and we'll share a bit of what the things that we experience and what we want to do to engage in this opportunity to be generous. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes for that. And then I'll call us all back for the discussion. Back. Hope you had a great discussion. And we're going to open the table tonight. And I'm going to nominate, as I see fit, just in a couple of suggestions that you guys and ladies would like to make. So I'm going to start off with the Linden team. Are you guys ready for us? Whatever. Hey guys, thank you. Tell us a bit, what is the ideas that just went around the discussion, the circle tonight?
We have a lot of bean counters, and they stuck over my head. But it was a lot of cost cutting at places where you can cost cut, so that you can give money to places that need money. But at the end of the day, there's the option of providing that meal for free for the client, to say customers, employees. But then figuring out how you can get that money from sustainable source so that it's not just something you haphazardly decide and then later you have to maybe cut it again and you have to cost cut. So it has to be sustainable. So that was the one thing. And then we said if they can get everybody together to sit and think about where you can cost cut and even bring in some nice programs for the employees to see where they can, whoever cuts the most cost, can win a 2,000 Rand voucher, but that cost that they cut can be channeled back to people who really need food and need money so that it becomes a really organizational wide initiative. Or you must get completely crazy and just go, let's just double everybody's salaries, we need money. And see what God does with that.
Okay. Okay, thanks, accountants. Appreciate it. The guys in Tygerville, tell us a bit, what stirred around the table tonight?
Hi there. Camera's not as wide as we hoped it would be, but interesting. Yes, it's frightfully difficult within a large corporate to try and assist everyone. And the topic or the consensus we reached was it's also not necessarily responsible to try and paint everyone with the same even concerning brush. In other words, you don't know, and it's frightfully difficult determine the need across the board. But by having a servant leadership mentality and driving that culture throughout within the entire management community, that ability to have the time to understand the team members across the company, you're able to then identify specific needs, and then that creates more opportunity there. But at the end, it's having that ability to liaise with God in terms of his will, and not trying to resolve it, continuously looking out for those opportunities, and that is creating that time as a leader to have the capacity to engage and understand who's what the needs are, and knowing that. I think that the whole principle as well around the mentor-mentee concept is it's continuous engagement, but with that mindset and compassion throughout. So living and breathing in a loving way, exposing Jesus' love automatically should distribute throughout as well. It starts at a point and it starts flowing through, having that there.
Okay, so understanding the environment, understanding people's needs, that set you in a place where you can start putting something into action. From the LifeWork team in Midstream, give us a bit of feedback from your side. I see someone is moving and ready. You're probably nominated for this, brother.
Good evening, everybody. Greetings from Midstream. Yeah, so we started off by discussing to understand really the need of the people. We often come up with very bright ideas as a company, but that doesn't really address the needs of the company. And then secondly is to go beyond what is the social responsibility of the company and to make it personal. We spoke about initiatives such as making soup for people during winter, getting challenged to give away your jacket at a sermon, and that's the things that really take from you as a person, rather than just clapping hands and giving ideas to a church to distribute money, or to a company to distribute money, to make it personal. Then also, to work cleverly with that responsibility and to get non-profit organizations in to help people maybe to structure the budgets and make it tangible so that people can help themselves. So it's not only to give away, but to give them hope and to give them some means that they can build on that, and to I think really start a culture of giving in organization and to make it personal. That's sort of the comments that was around the table.
That's brilliant. So Henry, I'm gonna throw it back to you. So you were faced with a situation where you guys realized, listen here, there's something that needs to be addressed in our organization. And I want you to elaborate a bit on what was the action steps that you took to really cultivate something of a generosity culture in your organization?
Yeah, Jake, so I think the first challenge was at that point, as I said earlier, as we sat there, was I think the first challenge and the bold one is do I say something or don't I, right? So, and again, all the devil has to do in our lives is to sow disbelief or distrust, or So you sit there, you're convinced, your heart breaks for your people, and then you want to stand up and say, but guys, and then the devil says to you, remember, you work for this corporate that's listed there and there. If you open up your mouth here, you'll most probably spend the next 7 years in jail. That's not really that bad, but it's it's part of that challenge. So I think the first challenge we had is what that I had is just to say, do I say something or don't I? And and the net result is, at that point is, like I said, it's just we've raised it, and when the comment was made around the jackets, and the other two comments were made around the need. I very quickly realized that I don't have to say anything. This is not my fight. This is the Lord's fight. He's created this moment. He's created this opportunity. And all that we have to do at this point in time is step into this opportunity. Somebody around the midstream table actually said, identifying the real need. And I can tell you in the next 30 minutes, we were just outside of our executive boardroom. Somebody went and took a traditional, easel with a flip chart on it and brought it out and said, but do we understand the problem? Of course, we are committed as a corporate, into great initiatives. We really do a lot of great things throughout the year, yet we found that there was need in our own staff. And how do you bring those two worlds together? And within half an hour, we've with the team that was around the table, we could very quickly rethink this and say, the need is actually with our new hires. So is there difficult times with the existing staff? Yes, there is. You will always have it. We spoke about financial management, the discipline of it, and everything else that goes with it. But the reality is, if we look at unemployment in our country, that's sitting where it is, the time that it takes somebody to find a new job, or a new job, is a significant amount of time. And then once they find a job, we know through statistics that everybody today that's employed in South Africa is responsible for up to 5 individuals, directly connected to him. So what happens to a new employee of ours? So whether it's a technician, a call center agent, a data clerk, whatever the role might be, a driver, firstly, they have to borrow money to get to work. So there is no previous salary. They don't have money to get to work tomorrow. Then they have to eat somewhere. And then, those were the two key things. And then we realized, and I think you said it earlier, it's just not if they don't have that money, but they've got a letter of employment, where do they go and get that money? They go to a loan shark, or they go to the family. But somewhere there needs to be repaid. And within half an hour, we realized that, but wow, we can just look at those two items. We will make a significant difference to the people, to our new hires. Because one is that they wouldn't have to go to a loan shark, and typically they wouldn't have to put an additional burden on the family. They might not have extra to take home, but at least they're not dependent on that. And then the other thing that we found was a very subtle but very important one in our view is to say that the other area where we saw great need and the disparity between the staff was really when it comes to work. The guy that's been employed for a long time, comes to work, he's properly dressed, it's a nice pair of jeans, whatever the case might be. That guy that just, has been unemployed for the last 3 months, 6 months, 4 years, he wears his best clothes, and that might be 4 years old. And we could see and feel the discomfort, and we could hear it from talks of what those people had within the company. So those were 3 practical things that we found. One was really an emotional connection, that just really breaking your heart. Was, as people, we're very quick to judge, right? So, you see a guy for the first time, you see how he's dressed, and you've already made up your mind of the capabilities or abilities of that individual. So what we did ultimately is we actually came up with a really practical plan around this. So the first one didn't tell money, so it was easy enough. And I think somebody in here also mentioned it. So now that we knew it was only a certain segment of the staff, we've put in a food component for the first 30 days. So until you get your first paycheck, you eat for the month for free. So you can come to work and you can eat. And like I said, this is what actually broke my heart again. It's quite a generous portion. And guys, I can tell you the amount of times today still that I see people walking out of the canteen with half of that polyester container still full of food. There's a portion of that goes to someone, or perhaps to a later sitting or to somebody else. So that was a practical thing that we sorted. And the other thing that we sorted through HR was just making sure that we covered the commute, so getting them to work and back. And just by removing those two big pieces out of their lives, it created we enabled them, to come to work. And then the last one was for me personally, was quite a pleasant journey. Then the last thing that we spoke about was, how do we address the need for corporate, let's call it corporate clothing or work clothing, not corporate, but just, for workloads. And in that moment, the Holy Spirit said to me, street store. And I said to Andy, but why don't we do our own street store? And he said to me, what's that? I said, we've got over 600 people that work here. We all have the extra pair of khakis, the extra pair of jeans, the extra jacket. I mean, that blue jacket that started this, we all have like 4 of those, which you get one every year. So what if we just take one of the empty storerooms and we create a new employee street store? And we push it into the entire company, and everybody can donate at will. Whatever they want to donate, they can donate. It's an old time. There's again, same principle as street store. It has to be clean, it has to be presentable. So how do you up them? And we allowed the company, guys, within a day or two, that store was wrapped side to side. And part of what we now do is when you're a new hire like that, you tell them about the street store. And there's rules, you can take 2 garments, 2 sets of clothing. And then the last piece was sort of the really emotional part about this is, well, that's really where you change people's lives. And ironically, we have not heard one complaint throughout our entire company about staff not getting the food allowance, not getting the travel allowances. By the way, the street store is open for everyone, not just new employees. So we take them there. But if you need a jacket today and the winter's been too good to me and I don't fit in mine anymore, but it fits you, go for it. You can go and have it. You can't go take 5 jackets, but you can go and take a jacket. And that's really been, it was a great way for us to involve all of the staff. And in the overall, the net effect of that is not only that we make a difference on all the new hires within our lives, but I think we make on a social responsibility, generosity, from a generous perspective and a generosity perspective, we make a big difference in people's lives. And we created something that everybody in the country can get a little bit of that feel-good juice that goes with it. And that's our story.
And that's brilliant. Henry, something that you mentioned was just when you calculate the cost of sponsoring an employee, just the commuting, the fees for commuting, and also the food, it didn't add up to a lot of money per person spent, but the effect of that was so personal, and it changes the culture within that organization. Just the fact that you guys really went to the real need, and addressing that specific need. It didn't cost you guys too much. Oh, sorry, Henry, you guys are muted.
Okay, sorry, JD. Thanks, man. Yeah, you're 100% right. As I said, because we could rethink it, and of course it's really rethinked around new hires. That's part of the budget today. So and it's not big money, guys. It's really not big money that you spend. The food side of it's like I said, it's roughly $600. The travel, depending on where the guys live, is somewhere between 12 and 1,500 rand. But you take that 2,000 rand out of it, and the guy that's earned 6,000 rand, he would have to borrow that money somewhere. And if it's at a loan shop, it's somewhere between 30 to 40% interest per month, right? So they just never ever make it back, you know. So it is relatively small. For us, you know, if you, I think one of the regions said there's a lot of beanies there. You know, if you look at your return on investment, the goodwill and you know that we got, you know, out of this from the company as a whole and from all of our other staff is just phenomenal, you know. So I mean, we really do some great things, but within our company, and it's really the moment it creates a culture where the rest of the staff, you know, start to learn generosity. You create a platform where they can be part of generosity and then live generosity. So which then changes a culture in an organization altogether.
You know what I love about the story is that you guys really went out of your way to be generous and addressing a specific need. But now the kickbacks, if I can say it like that, is a change of culture, and I think people are just a lot more motivated to bring their best to work, and that's obviously just something that you guys didn't probably plan for, but that's just part of the good fruit that comes from being generous. So thank you, Henry. We appreciate it. Thank you for coming and sharing, and I think you're stirring something in our hearts that we can get creative and really practical on being generous as Christian leaders.
Thanks, JT. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Now,
Very much.
everyone, I'm going to give us a 7-minute bio break, stretch the legs, maybe, and then we're going to be back in 7 minutes, and then we're going to introduce Richard Butler to come and take on the next session for us tonight.
And that's what we did at the other things. We actually did a vegetable garden, and then other small vegetables and wild vegetables. Once you've done the marbles here, then you don't put a lot of the you cost what we do. And it's something that we just go there. When they're affected on the walking to teach them to plant that they can get a meal out of vegetable fats, you know, and supplement whatever else with
Otherwise, it becomes so very
then they got into
Hi. Okay, we are ready. Thank you, Richard Butler, or Gerard Butler, or
Pick your favorite.
welcome back to the session, Richard. It's such a privilege having you back. I mean, you blew us away last year with something that you presented, and we are so thankful for having you back. Talking to us a bit about building a culture of irrational generosity. I think that is something that definitely clickbait when you put this on the internet. Tell us a bit about what you want to share with us. Tell us a bit about yourself, just where you function, and then you can go on in with the keynote presentation tonight. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, JP, and thank you for inviting me back a second time. You know, the first time is nice, but the second time is like, it wasn't too bad the first time. So thank you for that. I do appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I was hoping you introduced me, but anyway, I'll think on my feet for the moment. So what I do, so let me start with the boring part. I'm an actuary by trade, so I do numbers for a living. I'm a CEO of an insurance company called BetterSure. It's a small insurance company. I do a few other things as well. I run a pension fund, chairman of a pension fund. I lecture at the University of Pretoria, mathematics, risk management. So if you don't fall asleep after today, I've didn't do my part. Okay, so I'll try my best. I do have the credentials to make you fall asleep. So yeah, I love this idea. And I just want to say one thing, JP. When I was asked about this idea to talk about generosity, I didn't quite know that this is going to be the week I have to determine bonuses and increases. So it's been an expensive week. Let me just say that.
Lord works in mysterious ways.
The Lord has a sense of humor. All right. Okay, well, as I said, yeah, thanks a lot. As you can hear, I do a lot of things in my spare time, but really, I think I do have a passion just for sharing learnings. And I think that's really the key thing I would like to talk about today. And, I've walked in on this idea of irrationality, and sacrificial generosity. And what does that mean? What does it look like? And it's something that the Lord has stirred in my heart for so many years, and it's not something I get right. Even this last couple of weeks in preparation of this session, the Lord challenges you on many, many levels. So hopefully I can share a few things that's happening in my life. But before we get started, I want to think about two things. Who is the most generous person you've ever met? And the most generous business you've ever engaged with? Just think about that for a moment. And think about why that was. And what was left with you at the end of that. Now, for me, if I go back, the most generous person was actually, maybe some of you as well, you might think about your grandfather. He was, and that was in my case as well. So many years ago, we were on a holiday at Ivongo. Anybody been to Ivongo? It used to be a nice place. Maybe it still is, I don't know. There's no water, definitely. But Ivongo, and I remember there was a helicopter, and they actually were allowed to take you as a kid. You get into a helicopter, you jump into the sea. Can you believe, for $50? Now, those years, $50 was an enormous amount of money. And my grandfather said, you must go, you must go. And I'm like, but you're crazy. How can you spend 50 Rand on me? Am I worth 50 Rand? And the realities are, if you think about these people or the businesses that you've engaged with, what probably stood out for you is not what they did for you, but how it made you feel. The sense of self-worth it has given you. Like in my case, with my grandfather. It's probably the first statement in my life that I've had from anybody saying, you are worth it. And obviously, if we look at Jesus' example, it's just the perfect example of irrational generosity. Obviously, giving his life to us as sinners, to you and me, doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. I still can't comprehend this idea, how can he love us so much? And if we think about the story, you remember the story where John the Baptist was just beheaded. And soon thereafter, Jesus was quite distraught by these events. He heard the news. He was distraught and he said, I must go to a secluded place. So he got into the boat, went to the other side. And what happened? A crowd followed him. So Jesus was in a time of distress, of need, of emotional emptiness. He just needed to recharge. He had a good reason to recharge. But yet, when he got to the other side, he saw there's a lot of people with needs, and he decided to serve them again. Again, irrationally. So if you follow Jesus' example of irrational generosity, I think the challenge we find ourselves in life is that the more sacrificially and the more irrationally we act when we have a life of generosity in our personal lives and in our business lives, the more rational resistance you will find. And you should expect that. If you've got shareholders, you've got a board, you want to do things, you should expect that irrationality. But what does it look like? So I think there's three stages in our lives, very simplistically, if you look at this picture. When we are very young, we always have 2 out of 3 things. When you're young, you've got the time, you've got the energy, but you don't have the money. So you've got 2 things, time and energy. When you're middle ages, you've got arguably the energy and the money, but you don't have the time because you're working, you're running after kids, you're running a business or building a business. And when you're old, you've got the time and the money, but not the energy. So this idea about irrational generosity is most likely that you will be challenged in the area where you've got the least to give. As a child, I was, from an early age, highly, I suppose, challenged by this idea that I must give a tithe. I only get like $50 of pocket money. Come on, Lord, how much do you want? And I'm sure you don't need this money at all. Why do you want my 5 Rand? Please. And with my son the other day, we had the entrepreneurs day at school, and he made some good money there. And I told him, listen, okay, but remember now your tithe. And now he was suddenly confronted with other, oh, but it's so much money. And what value am I getting? Even the cool drink at the church is poor. So we had a great conversation. But it's so important for us to start building this idea. When we get to our middle ages, I suppose when we were in the working ages, this idea of we don't have the time. So maybe you are more sacrificially challenged on generosity with your time, not your money. It's easy to give. It's harder to get involved. So many years ago, I stay in Fairy Glen, the east of Pretoria, and there's a. So now I get a bit of an echo, so just give me it for a second. I don't know how I switch this thing off. Give me a second. No. No. How do I do this? Then we disconnect audio. Ah, so now the audio is gone. But how do we get the screen back? That's not a problem. We do this. There we go. All right. So a very simple thing. So I don't have time. I'm involved with many things. You know, people always ask me, you're busy with the students at university, you're helping them, and for so many years, every year I tell the Lord, listen, I promise I'll do it once, because they really needed me at that time. Because the previous the professor had a heart attack, and there's only one guy that could do the subject, and I was the top student the previous year. So they said, well, would you do it? So I'm like, oh, are you mad? But okay, I'll do it. But for 1 year, Lord. And by the end of the year, I would say, listen, okay, Lord, it's now fine. Thank you. I've made my difference. And a student will send you an email and say, thank you for the difference you've made in my life. I'm like, no, I don't want to make a difference anymore. I don't have time to make a difference. But anyway, the 1 year, so we've got in Fairy Glen, this little, what do you call it? It's a bridge over the I think it's the Moroleta Spruit. Beautiful little bridge, but there's a lot of sort of bossies, weeds coming out of this thing. And the Lord challenged me to go, take your shovel, clean the bridge. I said, great, Lord. I love your idea. This is the opportunity to create a job for you and us. You and us can clean the bridge. I'm doing wonderful things. And the Lord said, no, I'm not asking your money to pay for you and us to create a job. I'm asking you to go and clean the bridge. Okay, we had a debate for about 6 months. And then I realized I will probably have to go clean the bridge because it won't clean itself and I'm not allowed to do anything else. So me and my son, we went the Saturday morning because we thought we were going to try it. It's sort of embarrassing. Now, I'm an introvert, believe it or not. But you don't really want to be in a space where people see you and like, what are you doing? Are you mad? You're doing like shoveling stuff, you can outsource that. But anyway, so we did do that. But you know what happened? Well, first of all, how other people stopped and joined in. People bringing you Cokes, hooting and clapping. And that was okay, interesting. It's not as embarrassing. But actually, we only did this once. So for about seven years now, nobody touched this bridge. We did it once. From that day forward, the community kept the bridge clean. It was actually repainted the other day. And if I look back at it, I'm like, okay, I'm ashamed of not listening to the Lord for 6 months and arguing with him. But the reality is sometimes it's a small act of obedience. He just wants your obedience. And I think that's the heart of generosity. It's not just about what you give. It's about your ability or your willingness to do what he says, even if it's irrational, because that was irrational to me. And it was wonderful. And I thought, okay, fine, Lord, I read the lesson. Thanks. Let's move on. Yeah, I did it again. And then on the other street, there was another corner that nobody cared for. Same thing happened. So yes, now every now and again, we have to go and cut lawns and cut weeds. But the beauty of the community is every time you do it, I only have to do it once. And then the community takes over it. Somebody else, I don't know who does it, but every day it happens. So yeah, you might be challenged at the area where you can give the least. It might be your time, your money, or your energy. So be prepared for that. It will be sacrificial. But I also want to talk about not just about our own lives, but this idea about our businesses. How do we take this idea of irrational generosity into the culture of your business? And Peter Drucker says this. He says, culture eats strategy for business, for breakfast. Okay, a cliche. And that's why if you really want to change your society, your community, it starts with changing yourself, but then you have to change your organization. And how do you change the culture of an organization? And everybody has the ability to do that. Whether you're in a senior position, whether you're the leader or not, you have the ability to do that. So what is the process? Now, Investopedia just quickly defines culture. So culture is about the set of beliefs and behaviors, the way we hire, our practices in our business. It's the core beliefs that represents how we do things. Somebody once said when I joined in my previous life, I used to be at a very large insurance company around the corner. And it's a big company, it's very corporate, it's well established. Now I started this, basically have to do a startup business. I have to start from scratch. But one of the things that excited me the most was this idea of building culture. And how do you build culture? Where do you start? What's the process involved? So what I'm going to share with you is this idea of the process of building culture. And trust me, it's a work in progress. This is not the perfect science, because we're working with people, and people are not Excel spreadsheets, unfortunately. Anyway, so how do we build, I didn't say it. Okay, so how do we build this culture? How do we go about, where do you start? So there's 5 things, all right? 5 ideas, 5 steps around. You want to transform your household, your business, your community, cement it as part of the culture. All right, so where do we start? Well, Simon Sinek says this. We'll know him. He says, leaders are the ones who are willing to give up something of their own for us. Their time, their energy, their money, maybe even the food of their plate. When it matters, leaders choose to eat last. Yeah, and when I read this earlier this week, I had to redo my bonus schedule again, because again, you're so challenged by these ideas when it becomes really practical. One of my leaders in my team earlier this week, I just overheard a conversation. And it was a person in our business going through very tough financial situations. And we give our people lunches. Not all days, but at least probably about 3.5, 4 days a week. And I just spotted how she decided, no, she's not eating her lunch. I saw it for a few weeks. I don't know, was the lunch bad? I thought it was actually quite good. But then I saw how she gives it in secret to one of an employee that's really, really struggling. And I thought, wow, that's such a good sign of what's happening in the culture. Okay, but it starts from us as leaders. It starts from you. So if you ask your employees, the people that work for you, or your family's better, feedback's a bit more direct. If you ask them, would they describe you as a generous person or not? Now, if you don't know, there's one way to find out, and that is to ask. That's quite helpful. All right, so it starts with you. If you don't have a belief, if you don't live generously with your time, your money, and your energy, you cannot expect your business to be generous. If you think back to this, maybe a business that came to mind, and think about generosity, maybe it was KFC with a £2 feed a child, which is actually quite nice. Or maybe what was, I don't know, Debonair's, it gives you double cheese rather than single cheese. I don't know. It might have been something that speaks to generosity. But it might have been quite difficult to find a good example of a business. It's probably not that easy. There's nothing pops to mind. It just shows you what opportunity I believe there are for businesses in this country to truly make a difference. Just be generous. Just live generously. So it starts with you as the leader. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to translate that into your company purpose. Your company purpose is critical. So Mark Twain said, the 2 most important days of your life is the day you were born and the day you find out why. The why you exist as a company must be intricately linked to the idea of serving, of being generous. If it's not, if your why is simply to make profit or to be the leader in pharmaceuticals, it's probably not quite a strong why. And you can't expect people that you're going to attract with that why to be people that live generously, or to attract leaders that believe in serving, like Jesus did. Microsoft had this one. Their why or their purpose is to say, empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. What's nice about this one is about giving. It's about serving. How do I enable others to do more? So go do the assessment of your why and make sure everybody in your organization knows the why. Now, I've been in the business and we're small, company, smallish, 110 people. And the first thing I did when I joined, I'm like, I'm going to make a big board of the why, the vision and the why we exist and what we do. And for 3 years later, and then our people, executive, she came to me and she said, I think we need to spend more time. I think you need to spend more time with the people to talk about our why. I'm like, Joan, come on. They see it every day. Because every Friday, I actually make a point to stand in front of the big board to talk to them about what happened in the business this week. Obviously, we're wasting everybody's time. And we pretty much now 90% done. And that board has been there for about 3 years. You won't believe me. if I then ask in the sessions, I just start with, why do we exist? Simple question. Why do we exist? What are we here to achieve? As Bereshoot, what do we do? I probably get the right answer in about 5 to 6% of the cases. I'm like, guys, we. It's on the board. Behind me every day. And we bring it into our conversations. But I think it's one of those things, do not underestimate that if it's on a banner, the people will believe it. Those of you who've been into corporates, the why cannot be you walk into and you can see this beautiful head office building with these beautiful banners. You know, the banner with the eagle on it talks about excellence and the mountain. That's useless. That's useless. It must be practical. If you want to assess the culture of a company, the best way and easiest way to assess the culture of a company is having 5 conversations. Ask 5 people, depending on the size of the company, of course. Ask 5 people to describe their leader. Describe the leader. And from those answers, you will get the culture of the company. Guaranteed. That's why I said, we sê die vis vrot van die kop af. You know, the fish goes bad from the top. You got what I said. Anyway, so it's one thing to say, cool, the leader is fine. You know, the leader believes it. He lives generously. He's generous with his time. He's generous with his practices. It's intricately entwined with the purpose of the business and the value set of the business. But it will become the banners that's up there. Doesn't change anything. Where does change truly happen in the culture? Is, well, the first step is you first have to define, what does it mean? What does generosity mean, actually? If you want to bring generosity as a key lever, or if you, for that matter, if it's teamwork or collaboration or it's excellence, what does it mean? What are the behaviors that support that? What does generosity look like? Because what you will find is that people have vastly different definitions of something that you think, well, generosity is quite obvious, no? But you'll find out it's defined in a myriad of ways. And you have to define what are the behavioral standards. And once you've identified those behavioral standards, that's your third step. The main change only happens because up to now it's theoretical. Yes, the leader is key. The purpose is key. What are the behaviors that support that purpose? You have to have those conversations with your people, everybody in the organization. But the change really happens at this habit of reflection, number 4. It is the feedback. You know, when I walked in here, there was a conversation about feedback, and I was already worried about getting feedback. But nonetheless, because we don't like feedback, you know, so it sounds like it was attacking. But it's not. We need to be able to give feedback to each other. If you say, as part of my culture, as part of my values of my organization, generosity is a cornerstone, and we've identified what generosity looks like. As the leader, you need to have extreme bravery for this step. Extreme bravery to ask your people to give you feedback. Brené Brown speaks about the power of vulnerability. That's the idea. Are you as a leader willing to be vulnerable enough to receive feedback, to hear that I thought I'm very generous, but people do not experience that. I am not living the values as I think I am. Because we judge ourselves by our intent, but we judge others by their behavior. And the true change happens when you can start aligning and getting feedback on your behavior and your team's behavior as well. And 360 tool is a wonderful tool to use in that regard. So reflection is absolutely critical. And then lastly, there's these, I always want to say the environmental cues. You know, typically when you talk about culture, the thing that comes to mind is like a beautiful Google office. So culture is the bean bags, the colorful room, and the water floor. That's often what people think culture is. But that's not what it makes you feel. You can see companies that have the beautiful building, but the culture is shocking. I've seen many of those examples. So, but they are important. They are reminders. What are the visual reminders that reminds you of the right behaviors? Now, James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about this idea of you need to sort of, you know, when I see something, put an artifact down. When I see it, it reminds me to do something specific. Something very simple in our business is that, you know, we believe in serving the client. Client must be number one. Every decision must be driven by that, not by business partners, not by internal things, not by system requirements. What is good for a client? And there's not been a single disagreement I have not been able to resolve when I simply ask, what's good for the client? And suddenly it just aligns people's perspectives. So to do that, we said, well, if we want to be service the client, we want to serve the client. It's one of our values and one of the elements to our culture. How do I do that? How do I remind people? So the very simple thing was, and it actually works, there's always a chair in around the boardroom with a little sticker on or a sheet cover that says client. Right. Now, if you're late, you're probably going to sit on the client chair, but your job is then to remind everybody of the client. How would the client feel if we do this? How would the client feel if we reduce our benefits? How would the client feel if we increase our premiums? Whatever the case might be. All right. Or if we change policy conditions. Those visual reminders become critical. So you must go and ask for your business, for your industry, what are they? But this is not the culture. Culture is not the environment. It's an element of it. But they do help. They do help. So what are the few things in our business that we do? Number one, we give people unlimited leave. Yes, that's irrational. And I still think it is. But what's interesting about that, this idea of giving unlimited leave, number one, we said we want to be an output-based organization. It's not about being here 8 to 5. It's not about watching the clock. Who loves being watched by the manager from 8 to 5? I think nobody. You can't, the only people you have in your business will be the ones that have to be there, that got no other choice in life, unfortunately. So we believe in this idea of this concept because we believe in an entrepreneurial spirit as part of our, and being generous with leave. And we really encourage it. Now, interesting, the studies on unlimited leave, it sounds irrational to some extent. The studies actually prove that people take less leave, ironically, which is actually also a problem. Now, you solve that problem by the leaders advertising when they go on leave. Sorry, guys, I'm going on leave. I'll be back, And I can tell you this is, for me, sometimes a challenge because I'm so scared people will not do their part. You always feel that way. That sense of control we like, we sort of like it, but you have to give that up. So unlimited leave, we give our people lunches and drinks as well. A lot of behavioral science that we've tested there. The one was, every week we put out the drinks, Cokes and, whatever, have a can, you go for it. And then by about Tuesday, that's all gone. You obviously have a budget. So it's like, okay, that doesn't work. So what we then tried, we said, well, let's have an abundance mindset. Let's test abundance as the theory. So we put the whole month's drinks in the fridge, the beginning of the month, and guess what happens? It lasts a month. Suddenly it lasts a month because we took out scarcity. The moment people perceive something is scarce, they want to get there as quickly as possible, otherwise they'll miss out. Now there's so much, people just take what they need. So somewhat irrational, I suppose. I think it's already been discussed by Henry. I think the way you help your employees financially, always a difficult conversation. We moved offices very far away. We were in Randburg, now we're in Garsfontein Off-Road. Major change. Massive impact on people, apart from the travel time it takes. I mean, some of my employees, so we're in Garsfontein, some of my employees stay at Grasmere Toll Plaza. You know where Grasmere Toll Plaza is? This is like a half day's drive. It's unthinkable. And what we had to do when we had to make this move, well, some of the employees said, listen, they cannot do it. So we actually said, listen, you know what? We are going to be as generous as possible to separate. We don't want to lose you, but it's not sustainable. You've got a family and kids. You can't spend 3 hours this way, 3 hours that way. Not possible. So when we had to let people go as a result of it, mutually, yes, the law says, 1 week per year service, I mean, we pushed ourselves to at least 2 months per week, 2 months pay for every year of service. That level of generosity. Yeah, we were almost bankrupt and I was almost fired, but I think the Lord will provide eventually. And he did. Because often you are very generous with this one individual, but the impact on the environment is so profound. So your policies, how you appoint people, how you let them go, must speak to this heart of generosity. And often you will be massively challenged in this regard. Because sometimes when you let people go, it's because of underperformance. It's because they did something wrong. It's because you are upset, because they hurt the business. So there must be always an element of truth to it. But go back to your core values. Are you being generous in this situation? As an insurance company, how we pay claims, of course, yes. This morning I had all the big hairy problems come to my desk. So all the other clever people couldn't solve them. So this client's obviously very upset. I had a slam dunk case. You know, what he was claiming for wasn't covered by the policy. Black and white, and legal has given them a nice response, proper legalese, which didn't necessarily help the situation. But then looking at the case, we decided as an example, you know what, we actually are going to pay this claim. We're going to pay this claim. You know, should we? Well, legally not. Is it the right thing to do? Yes, it is. But where's the balance between those things? You know, and then the client came back and said, well, long story, very grateful and glad he could help. But the client actually helped us identify deficiency in our system. And I'm so glad he did, because if I found that deficiency 3 years later, the cost would have been millions, not just a few thousand rand for a claim. And I think lastly, your corporate identity, you know, how you set your environment, you know, how you place people. I mean, I walk into so many offices and the leaders will tell you, oh, the business is so struggling. You walk into the office and you realize, wow, this is such a dark, depressing place. And then you get there and come on, guys, you need to do your best. You need to give your best. But the environment that you've created is a dark and depressing place. You can never give your best in those environments. So think about that. And as Jesus said, it is absolutely more blessed to give than to receive. And I think the challenge is a friend of mine when I was in grade school, he always said, you can never outgive God, but please try. Please try. I'm not preaching a prosperity gospel at all. I think the moment you expect that return or almost require that return for your generosity, you're losing the blessing around it. Absolutely, immediately. So you have to challenge yourself, because most of the idea about generosity is absolutely irrational. It's not something that the spreadsheet will make sense. My experience tells me every one of those things that we've done, we've been challenged by it. Our group got a new FD the other day, and the first thing he said was, what are these lunches? Why are people giving you lunches? Because he was sort of using one of our chairs, and the lady brought the lunch to him. Next to his, he's like, whoa, somebody bringing me lunch. I said, but he's like, no, but what does this cost? You know, you can see where it comes from a different industry where this is completely unheard of. I said, you know what? I can promise you the productivity impact. I can't prove it because I didn't measure it. Well, there's some measure behind it. But the productivity impact of people being brought something. Most of my people in the office, they're not the ones. They are the providers. They are the breadwinners. I mean, there was a conversation about what some of our staff can do with 100 rand. They're like, Jesus, feed 5,000 with 100 rand, which is absolutely true. But in our space, they're not the ones somebody serves. Just the act of servitude. You know, when we do corporate sort of social days, we make a point of it that the leaders must make the food. We must do the braaiing. We must go take it to the people. You know, and that's small things that cements the culture of servitude and generosity. Does everybody like it? Absolutely not. Some of my people, some of my direct leadership team didn't like it. They can't reconcile with that worldview, and they will never do. And then there's a different conversation. You know, we'll be generous in a different way. All right. But you have to make the call. Never give up your values. And just last thought. If you think about your time, your money, your energy, what you cannot give away controls you. If you cannot give away your money, money is controlling you. Mammon is your God. If you can't give away your time, your life is controlled by your time and not by God. You cannot give away your energy or your health. Your life is being controlled by that. So who do you serve? That's the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I love your energy. Nobody fell asleep. Well done on that, Mr. Number Busher. Richard, there's normally after a session like this, we open the floor for a couple of questions that people just WhatsApp to me. And one of the questions that one of our groups asked is the following. How do you draw the line between reflection and overthinking in your organization?
Sure, as an academic at heart, I don't think there's something like overthinking. Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that you definitely get to a point where sometimes you're like, if you force people in a room for 3 hours to let's talk about an issue that doesn't exist, at some point in time that will become an issue. All right, guys, please don't think about the pink elephant. You will eventually start thinking about the pink elephant. All right, so that is a practical challenge, and I think that's leadership, and that's what your judgment. I think it's actually this idea of your responsibility as the leader in that organization. You need to understand where things are, and I think be led by the Spirit is just a practical thing. You need to know what is the true issues, and that's where the Spirit will have to identify that for you, and then you can find that balance. I think what practically works for us is just, we do regular surveys. We do regular surveys between our employees. At the moment, they're still anonymous because the level of trust is not there yet, where people are willing to put their names necessarily next to what the feedback they give. And not all of them, about 10 or 20%. So you find more safety, people speak more freely, if they don't know who said it. Now, it's not always that helpful. But I think with the surveys, and I think the key thing is to just test things over time. Look at trends. Your culture, you have to measure your culture. So we measure our culture very simplistically using a employee net promoter score. All right. It's a nice tool. It's probably I don't know what's better, to be honest. It gives you an idea of, will employees recommend working at Bereshoot to the friends and family? Simple question. And then you can get a sense of if you're at least doing things the right way. It doesn't tell you whether you're living your ideal values, just how your people like it or not. So it just gives you something. But yeah, there's definitely that risk of overthinking things, overanalyzing things. But I think if you keep it simple, short, I think when it comes to feedback, you do that regular intervals, you're looking for the trends over time. Yeah, you'll get enough information. You'll get enough information and it won't become overkill, I suppose. But yeah, I don't clearly have the answer to that.
Brilliant. No, thank you. I think you gave us a lot to think about. And one of the questions that came to me from Josie is what happened to my head? I just had something removed on my forehead. That's the only reason my wife didn't chase me with a cup or something like that. Don't worry, guys. Thanks for reaching out and just making sure I'm fine. Richard, I want to thank you. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for stirring something in our hearts, just practicalities regarding generosity. And I think the challenge lies with all of us now. A lot of us function in our organization, not necessarily as the executive team. We always feel like it's from the executive team that change will only happen. But there's a lot of influence that we do have, and there's a lot of things that we can start cultivating in our sectors, in our offices, and wherever we are. And that's where I want to land tonight, basically, is asking you the question. And when you go to your workbook, I'm always referring back to those circles. What is the big things that you learned tonight? I think it's very important that we take a couple of minutes and just reflect on that and write those things down. And the next step is then, with whom am I going to share some of these principles in my house? I think that's a very good place for us to start, is at home. How we live generosity at home, at our workplace, and then in our community. And I want to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on that. I want to remind you that the 21st of November, we'll be back again on this platform for our next session. But for the remainder of the evening, you've got a time of reflection, what you've learned, and then from there on, you can close with a couple of discussions around the table as you close the evening. But once again, Richard, Henry, we love you guys. Thank you so very much for your time, effort, and preparation for this. And may God bless you guys in everything that you do as you work with his people and as you cultivate something of his kingdom principles in your organizations. From my side then, people, love you, gotta leave you. See you on the 21st of November, and I'm looking forward to that.